A commando is a soldier or operative of an elite light infantry or special operations force, often specializing in amphibious landings, parachuting or abseiling. Originally, a commando was a type of combat unit, as opposed to an individual in that unit. In other languages, commando and commando denote a command, including the sense of a military or an elite special operations unit. In the militaries and governments of most countries, commandos are distinctive in that they specialize in assault on unconventional high-value targets. However, the term commando is sometimes used in relation to units carrying out the latter tasks. In English, occasionally to distinguish between an individual commando and the unit commando. The unit is capitalized. Green Berets and training origins. Since the 20th century and World War II, commandos have been set apart from other military units by virtue of their extreme training regimes. These are usually associated with the Green Beret, which originated with British commandos. The British commandos were instrumental in founding many other international commando units during World War II. Some international commando units were formed from members who served as part of or alongside British commandos, such as the Dutch Corps Commando Troepen, Belgian 5th Special Air Service, or Greek Sacred Band. In 1944, the Chasse Brigade was formed from the British 1st and 2nd Chasse, the French 3rd and 4th Chasse, and the Belgian 5th Chasse. The French Army Special Force still used the motto Qui ose gagne, a translation of the Chasse motto, who dares wins. In addition, many Commonwealth nations were part of the original British commando units. They developed their own national traditions, including the Australian Special Air Service Regiment, the New Zealand Special Air Service, and the Southern Rhodesian Special Air Service, all of whom share the same insignia and motto as their British counterparts. During the Second World War, the British Chasse quickly adopted sand-coloured berets. Since they were almost entirely based in the North African theatre, they used these rather than the Green Berets to distinguish themselves from other British commando units. Distinct from the Australian Special Operations 2nd Commando Regiment, who originated with the Jungle Fighting 2nd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment during the Second World War. The U.S. Rangers were founded by Major General Lucien Truscott of the U.S. Army, a liaison officer with the British General Staff. In 1942, he submitted a proposal to General George Marshall that an American unit be set up along the lines of the British Commandos. The original U.S. Rangers trained at the British Commandos Center at Achnacarry Castle. The U.S. Navy SEALs' original formation, the Observer Group, was also trained and influenced by British commandos. The U.S. Special Forces originated with the 1st Special Service Force, formed under British Combined Operations. Malaysian Green Beret Special Forces PASKAL and Grup Jarak Khas were originally trained by British commandos. The Brazilian Marine Special Operations COMANF also originated with Royal Marines mentoring other British units, such as the Chasse, led to the development of many international special operations units that are now typically referred to as commandos, including the Pakistani Special Services Group, Indian Marcos, and Jordanian Special Forces. Etymology. The word stems from the Afrikaans word commando, which translates roughly to mobile infantry regiment. This term originally referred to mounted infantry regiments, who fought against the British Army in the First and Second Boer Wars. The Dutch word has had the meaning of a military order or command since at least 1652. It likely came into the language through the influence of the Portuguese word commander. It is also possible the word was adopted into Afrikaans from interactions with Portuguese colonies. Less likely, it is a High German loan word, which was borrowed from Italian in the 17th century. From the sizable minority of German settlers in the initial European colonization of South Africa. 1943 Combined Operations I. Lt. Lieutenant Colonel D. W. Clark, produced the outline of a scheme. The men for this type of irregular warfare should, he suggested, be formed into units to be known as commandos. Nor was the historical parallel far-fetched. After the victories of Roberts and Kitchener had scattered the Boer army, the guerrilla tactics of its individual units prevented decisive victory. His S.C. L.T. Col. D.W. Clark's ideas were accepted, so also, with some hesitation, was the name Commando. During World War II, newspaper reports of the deeds of the commandos led to readers thinking that the singular meant one man rather than one military unit, and this new usage became established. History. After the Dutch Cape Colony was established in 1652, the word was used to describe bands of militia. The first commando law was instated by the original Dutch East India Company. Chartered settlements and similar laws were maintained through the independent Boer Orange Free State and South African Republic. The law compelled burghers to equip themselves with a horse and a firearm when required in defense. The implementation of these laws was called the commando system. Men called up to serve were said to be on commando. British experience with this system led to the widespread adoption of the word commandeer into English in the 1880s. During the Great Trek, conflicts with southern African peoples such as the Xhosa and the Zulu caused the Boers to retain the commando system despite being free of colonial laws. Also, the word became used to describe any armed raid. During this period, the Boers also developed guerrilla techniques for use against numerically superior, but less mobile bands of natives such as the Zulu who fought in large complex formations. In the First Boer War, Boer commandos were able to use superior marksmanship, fieldcraft, camouflage and mobility to expel an occupying British force from the Transvaal. These tactics were continued throughout the Second Boer War. In the final phase of the war, 75,000 Boers carried out asymmetric warfare against the 450,000-strong British Imperial forces for 2 years after the British had captured the capital cities of the two Boer republics. During these conflicts the word entered English, retaining its general Afrikaans meaning of a militia unit, or a raid. Robert Baden-Powell recognized the importance of fieldcraft and was inspired to form the scouting movement. In 1941, Lieutenant Colonel D.W. Clark of the British Imperial General Staff suggested the name Commando for specialized raiding units of the British Army Special Service in evocation of the effectiveness and tactics of the Boer commandos. During World War II, American and British publications, confused over the use of the plural commandos for that type of British military units, gave rise to the modern common habit of using a commando to mean one member of such a unit, or one man engaged on a raiding-type operation. World War I. Italy. The first country to establish commando troops was Italy, in the summer 1917, shortly before Germany. Italy used specialist trench raiding teams to break the stalemate of static fighting against Austria-Hungary, in the Alpine battles of World War I. These teams were called Arbeiter. They were almost always men under 25 in top physical condition and possibly at first, bachelors. Actually, the Arbeiter suffered fewer casualties than regular line infantry and were highly successful in their tasks. Many of them volunteered for extreme right formations in the turbulent years after the war, but some people of left-wing political persuasions created the Arbeiter del Popolo, and for some years held the fascist raids in check, defending Socialist and Communist Party sections, buildings, rallies and meeting places. During the liberation of Rome in 1944, U.S. troops broke into the Italian Ministry of Defense building in Rome and seized all World War I materials and documents pertaining to Arbeiter units. In the archives, Germany in World War I. In 1918, raiding troops called Sturmtruppen, or stormtroopers carrying submachine guns, mostly the MP-18, were sent by the Germans to try to disrupt or even break into no man's land and into the trenches of British and French lines.